This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word SHOW to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word SHOW, SHOW, to 33777. Text SHOW to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Hello, America. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, would be very, very happy to have you. I was actually going to talk about governors here, and I will get into governors, but every year at this time, I need to actually spend a little bit of time explaining some history to you, because I think people forget. I am Presbyterians. I don't participate in Lent. There are people in my church now who they give up stuff for Lent. A lot of Christians around the world, 2+ billion Christians, and many of them will celebrate Lent. I just saw an interview with Marco Rubio, who has the cross on his forehead. Today is Ash Wednesday. Side note, you know where they get the ash from for Ash Wednesday? From the palm branches from Palm Sunday from the previous year. So we are now 40 days from Easter. The Sunday before Easter is Palm Sunday. That's when Christians celebrate the entry of Christ into Jerusalem before the crucifixion. And they laid palm branches on the path of him on the white donkey. And the Christians today, particularly in the Catholic Church, they celebrate Palm Sunday and they use palm fronds, and they save the palm fronds and they burn them, turn them to the ash for Ash Wednesday the following year. Yesterday was Mardi Gras, the last big blowout, Fat Tuesday. Today is Lent. So what is the Lenten season? First, I'm going to ask, spare me your emails. There's always one or two people who feel the need to send me an email because I say one thing that they disagree with and they got to send it. Just don't worry. Easy way to get on the block list. I do know the history. I may make a misstatement, but I do this every year. In the Roman imperial times, before the conversion of the empire to Christianity, before Constantine made persecution of Christians bad, and Christians, the rich people started publicly claiming to be Christians to get into Constantine's court. Constantine, didn't actually convert his deathbed conversion. It was Theodosius who actually converted the empire and destroyed the altar of Jupiter in the Roman Senate. That was some time away. But during the Roman imperial times, when Christian persecution was a thing, people needed to understand, if you become a Christian, you're probably going to die. There has been a great deal of effort by secular academics to try to dismiss persecution of Christianity. There's a Notre Dame professor who actually wound up getting in trouble with the church for trying to write a book that basically said that the persecution of Christians really wasn't bad. It was actually very brutal. It was not pervasive across the empire. That's where a lot of Christians get it wrong. It was not pervasive across the empire. But there were waves of persecution, some of which did become pervasive across the empire. And if you converted to Christianity, particularly as more and more people lived in urban areas, you converted to Christianity, the odds are your body was going to be used to light the streets of Rome. That's what Nero did. He nailed a lot of people, or not nailed it, tied a lot of people to crosses and used their bodies, covered them in oil, and lit them to be the streetlights at night in Rome. Rome is, even to this day, it's a very twisting city at night. In the Roman times, it was very dark. People could get lost in the streets. There were muggers. They needed lanterns, and Nero decided to use the Christians as the lanterns of Rome. It's one of the major Christian persecutions. So if you were going to become a Christian, you needed to know what you believed. In the Roman Empire, they didn't want you converting because there's also in Scripture this belief that modern Christians still believe that if you are raised as a Christian, you get the benefits of God. And if you turn your back on the faith, well, you're going to wind up in a far worse spot in eternity. I mean, the very second chapter of Hebrews talks about this, of the ships that stay in the harbor and the ships that don't. And so in the Roman Empire, before Christians were prohibited from being persecuted, before the empire became Christian, the 40 days before Easter became a time for people who were interested in conversions to learn deeply about the faith. Remember, the Bible at this time wasn't even a thing. It was the passed around letters of the apostles. And the reason the apostolic letters made it into the New Testament is in large part because they were universally shared and acknowledged to have been written by the direct apostles of Christ. And these letters were shared and studied in the 40 days running up to Easter. And then on Easter, if you were a convert and you learned everything you needed to know about the faith and were ready to actually go through with it, knowing the persecutions and the executions that could come, you were baptized into the church. And that's how the early church operated throughout the Roman Empire. 40 days of learning deeply about your faith and understanding the consequences that could come for you for converting, and then your baptism on Easter, and you were a convert into Christianity, and then let the persecutions begin. Well, then the empire became Christian. And you had all these people who were like, well, I mean, how do we show our commitment to the faith now? We used to show our commitment to the faith by being willing to be persecuted. How do we show our faith now? And some of them moved out of the city into the desert or up into the mountains to live singular lives. They were called monks. They lived monastic lives, singular lives. Mono, Greek, one. They lived singular lives devoted to worship and prayer. And that's how they signified when you no longer risked persecution, they hardened themselves. They embraced asceticism and they gave up the world's luxuries to show essentially what they were doing is, I'm a better Christian than you. I'm going out into the desert. I'm giving up worldly luxury and I'm just going to devote myself to the word. I can't be killed by the emperor now, but I'm going to give up the world's luxuries for God. It was done partially in reaction to the wealthy deciding they wanted to get into good graces of the emperor, so they were converting publicly, living hedonistic, unconverted lives in private, but in public saying, I'm a believer, going to church, giving lavishly to the churches. And these people, the ascetics, they got fed up with saying, you know what, I'm going to go live in the desert. I'm going to show I'm actually a more worthy Christian. Over time, evolved the Lenten concept. And it was based on that 40-day study before the embrace of Christianity, before the persecution stopped, and now became a thing where still, without Bibles, how are we going to learn about the faith? Well, you're going to learn in small groups what the faith means. People started giving things up as a sign of they were giving up sins. They were giving up their luxuries. They were giving things up like that in this 40-day period to understand and embrace their faith. And that became the Lenten period. What started as a real expectation, you've got to understand what you're getting into because you might die because of it, morphed over time when you were no longer going to get killed for doing it to we want you to understand your faith, to understand the significance of Easter, that is the high holy day coming. And over time, people embrace the idea of, you know what, we see what the monks are doing. They're moving out to the desert. They're giving things up. We're going to give something up. And so now the concept have actually spread across Christendom. And after the Reformation, a lot of the Reformed faiths outside of Catholics and Orthodoxy, they stopped doing Lenten celebrations. It's not very common in Baptist churches or Presbyterian churches in the United States in particular. Lutheran churches do to some degree, and some others do. But I know more and more people now who they want to give up something. They feel like life is very luxurious, and they're willing to give something up for Lent, something they like. A friend of mine this morning announced he was giving up social media for Lent and deleted his accounts. Didn't pause his accounts, just deleted the account. Gone. Said, text me if you need me. He gave that up. I have a friend who did not do dry January. He does dry Lent, which, my gosh, I don't know that I'd want to do that. He's given up alcohol for Lent. If I gave up anything for Lent, it'd probably be exercise. But I got to go to the gym this afternoon. But that's the season we're in, and so you see many people. I'm seeing Brett Baer is on TV right now on Fox News, and he has the cross on his forehead from Ash Wednesday. It is something mostly Catholics do. Some other Christian denominations have embraced it. This is also the moment where I begin planning my Good Friday show every year. But that's what you need to know about where we are today. And it is a sign of the progress of Christendom in the world that we don't really have to worry in the West about persecution anymore. But increasingly, that's changing. It's not just the Nigerian Christians who are being murdered. We have had now multiple shootings at churches in this country. Increasingly, I mean, we're watching this James Tallarico situation in Texas where a heretic, and he very much is a Christian heretic, he very much claims to be a Christian and lies about his faith, misrepresents the faith. He's getting all sorts of national exposure by the press. We need Christians like this. He's given up nothing. As a side note on that, I want to tell you something, too. If you are an evangelical Christian in this country and you think that your religion and your politics are perfectly aligned, you're no better than the progressive Christian who thinks that Christianity and his politics are aligned. You have a higher mind, I think a lot of Christian evangelicals do, of how faith aligns with their politics. And there is a growing number of people on the right who think that you have to vote Republican if you're a Christian. You don't have to vote if you're a Christian. I'm not discouraging you from voting, but don't feel like if you're a Christian, you got to go vote for the Republicans. I would advise you not to vote for the Democrats, given where they stand. But Christianity is separate from politics, and God's will be done, whether you are in politics or not, if you're a Christian. But I got to tell you, as someone who went to seminary and realized how much my faith was wrapped around my politics and having to disentangle that, I think there's something to be said for how we on our side of the aisle react when we see the treatment of illegal immigrants in this country. Now, I know that gets under people's skin. And I'm not for keeping the illegal aliens here. But when you see the American government rounding up people at Home Depot because they're Hispanic, and that is happening, and you can deny it all you want, but that's a sin because it's true, it's happening, you as a Christian should be standing up and saying that's not right. When you see the government ignoring court orders and shipping people out of the country, even if you think the court order is wrong, we have a system of rules and laws in this country that's perfectly compatible with Christianity. And I think Christians need to stand up for law and order, because if we're going to abandon law and order is going to abandon us. So I have one friend who's given up politics for Lent. Not going to listen to me, not going to be on social media, not going to be engaged in politics. And I just think, man, you're lucky. It is corrupting a lot of souls these days, I think. But we give these things up now in the Lenten season because 2,000 years ago, people were willing to give up their lives for the faith. And so a lot of people these days want to give up vices during Lent. as a solidarity with those who are willing to give up their lives. It's a historic chain that goes back 2,000 years, a documented history that actually is, I think, something we should spend a little bit of time reflecting on, as more than 2 billion people on this planet, the largest religion on planet Earth today, begin the anticipation of the resurrection in 40 days from now. Guys, let's talk about life insurance for a moment. If you're married, you got kids, you probably want to start thinking about life insurance. Where do you go? How do you get it? And did you know if you receive life insurance through your job and you're laid off, you suddenly could be covered with nothing? These are the things you got to start thinking about as you start growing up. I had to think about them. You got to think about them. So think about them with SelectQuote. Head to SelectQuote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Don't have a medical exam? Don't want a medical exam? No problem. They partner with providers offering same-day coverage up to $2 million without needing to visit your doctor. And unlike other one-size-fits-all insurance companies, SelectQuote's licensed agents, they work with you. In as little as 15 minutes, they can compare policies from top-rated carriers and get what you and your family need. So go to SelectQuote.com and get a licensed insurance agent to help you. In fact, SelectQuote.com/Eric. SelectQuote.com/ERICK. SelectQuote.com/Eric. Hello and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. There is some breaking news. Kurt in Kansas City, Missouri. I want to go to you next. Kurt, let me tell you about the breaking news because it's relevant to your phone call, and that is Israeli Military and Emergency Services and Home Front Command have been instructed to prepare for an imminent American attack on Iran.
Wow.
Kurt? Yep.
Am I on now?
Oh, yes,
Eric?
You are. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking my call. Yeah, I was going to listen. I listened to your commentary on Iran, and I agree with 100% everything you said, and specifically how difficult it's going to be because of their worldview, okay, of, how do we change that regime? And it's not an overnight thing. But the United Nations, as worthless as an organization as that is, and I think we all agree, somehow they have got to be involved with a coalition of countries. It's going to take boots on the ground. I think it's going to take boots on the ground, but I'm tired of the United States being the only one. These other countries sit on their hands, and they know that if they don't do anything, if they don't form a coalition, if they don't get involved in this, then the United States is going to do it alone. And aren't we all tired of that?
I think we are. And I know the president is, and I think from my understanding is the reason the president is taking so long, in addition to the deployment of assets, is he's been working with the Arab partners and Israel to see if he goes in and delivers these strikes, are they willing to do the heavy lifting on the ground? And I think he's gotten some buy-in from them to be able to do it because he does not want American troops in Iran. On the other hand, one of the other things they're trying to do is if they do this, will the Arab partners support the Iranian people in a revolution? And apparently there's buy-in on that end as well. So trying to restructure. By the way, Kurt, I got to ask you before you get off the phone, since you're in Kansas City, the Speaker of the House in Missouri wants to pass a law to get rid of the license plates for the Kansas City Chiefs. That seems like it's more of a performative stunt, and maybe instead of being mad at the Chiefs, he should be mad at the local politicians in Kansas City. Since you're a resident, I figured I'd ask you.
It's very petty. This state line here that divides our city between Missouri and Kansas, we've poached businesses back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's gone on. I've lived here since 1984, and we poach businesses back. This is just very petty politics, is what it is. It's a very, very, very petty politics. People are very upset at the Hunt family, specifically, not necessarily Kansas, but at the Hunt family for the dedication that the people of Kansas City, Missouri, and Jackson County, have shown to the Chiefs since that stadium opened in 1972. But the city leaders in Kansas City and Jackson County for years and years, they got no vision whatsoever.
Yeah.
They got no where the Truman Sports Complex is. It's at a great location. It intersects I-70 and 435. It's easy to get to. It's easy to get in and out of from every direction you're coming in the city. And now they're going to move it clear out west into Wyandotte County, Kansas. And it's just, people are pretty upset about it. And this license plate thing, I hadn't heard that before, Eric. But
yeah, well, it just, by the way, so Kurt, it just literally hit. A buddy of mine just sent it to me. So, yeah, thanks for weighing in on that. Your reaction sounds very similar to what several other friends of mine out there have said, that this is just a ridiculous situation. And, yeah, they're mad at least. You know who I feel bad for? The season ticket holders at Arrowhead Stadium. That they for so long have had these seats, the tailgate and everything, and all that's going to change now. The entire culture of going to a Kansas City Chiefs game is going to change by this move because people just couldn't get together and do something for the fans. It's all about the Benjamins, to quote a certain member of Congress out there, which is sad. Greetings, my friends. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson. If you're just tuning in, there are now multiple reports out that Israeli emergency and military services are being advised for an imminent strike by the United States on Iran. It could just be a bluff. But I got to tell you, if you got the show notes today, you can text Eric to 33777. You don't even have to get into the actual show notes. You don't have a subscription. Just look at the graphic that shows up on the main page of my daily email, and you can see the radar of all of the planes that have been headed to the Middle East. And essentially every air refueling aircraft in the United States has now headed to the Middle East, which suggests a prolonged bombing campaign by the United States against Iran. We will see if that actually develops. I have been getting massive numbers of spam calls since I bought a vehicle for my son. And I was overwhelmed with those phone calls and decided I need to do something about it. And I signed up with Incogni, INCOGNI, incogni.com/Eric. If you go there, you can sign up too. And what they've done is they've gone online to the data broker sites that sell your information. And on my behalf, they've sent them takedown notices, telling them to take down all my information. I am still getting calls, but I am getting far less. I'm getting now maybe one every other day when I was getting 3 a day or 4 a day. It has definitely worked. I'm getting less email spam as well from random companies, and I'm getting less solicitations in the mail, credit card solicitations and things like that, all since I started using Incogni. It's been a noticeable difference. Incogni is INCOGNI. Incogni.com/Eric. You go sign up with Incogni. You get 60% off their regular price. They work behind the scenes 24/7, 365, sending takedown notices, following up, making sure you can do custom requests as well. If there's a website with your information, they will target that website for you. I just did that with a particular website. They're working on it right now. They're very hands-on for you. Incogni.com/Eric. I saw a piece by Harry Inton on CNN earlier, and it led me to think I should probably highlight this. If you were here in the second hour today, I was talking about New York City is going to raise property taxes 9.5% across the board to cover a major budget shortfall, and they're going to pull money out of their reserves. They're not interested in cutting services. They want to just raise taxes to keep the same pathetic services going. New York and New York City are kind of a monoculture with the Democrats now. In Virginia, the policies of the Virginia Democrats, now that they've taken over, are very similar to the policies of the New York Democrats, very similar to the policies of the Illinois Democrats, very similar to the policies of the Washington State Democrats, to the Oregon Democrats, to the Hawaii and California Democrats. There is a monoculture. We've talked about this on the program several times now, about this monoculture on the left, where the policy prescriptions of California Democrats and Virginia Democrats are exactly the same. Now, contrast that with Republican states. In fact, I was asked, there's a conference every year in Las Vegas called Freedom Fest, and they asked if I might be able to put a panel together on this particular topic. If you go to Bill Lee's Tennessee, the policy ideas of the Republicans of Tennessee are different from the policy ideas of Brian Kemp's Georgia, which are different from the policy ideas of Ron DeSantis' Florida, which are different from the policy ideas of Greg Abbott's Texas, which are different from the policy ideas of Kevin Stitt's Oklahoma. Around the country, Republicans do not have a monoculture. They actually have thriving little laboratories of democracy in our federalist structure that now differ from the Democrats, who have a one-size-fits-all policy, the disruption of cultural flows in the world, that everything is one-size-fits-all. And here in this particular situation, you've got an array of diverse policy ideas. Georgia has an income tax. Florida and Texas do not have income taxes. Other Republican states are thinking of changing it. School choice is different in each state. Who gets school choice? One of the problems in the state of Georgia, where I am, for those of you who recognize it's now become a swing state while Florida's locked in, is that prior Republican governors in the state before Brian Kemp attracted a lot of Fortune 500 business to do business in the state. But those Fortune 500 companies didn't just hire Georgians. They brought in people from New York, California, Oregon, Washington, and elsewhere who have fundamentally changed the political dynamics of the state. Also, the Hollywood film tax credit in Georgia brought in a lot of progressives to the state of Georgia. And finally, Republicans saw the light of, hey, maybe we should be helping our businesses in the state. Also in Florida, they deployed school choice massively, and a lot of parents in Florida who used to vote Democrat now vote Republican because they take advantage of school choice. Georgia has technically embraced school choice, but it's not a very good setup in Georgia. It's not as expansive as Florida or what Texas is doing, all of which those school choice programs make states more Republican. That's something every Republican legislature in the country should consider, is that the more aggressively you expand school choice in your state, the more your state becomes Republican. Why? Because once parents take advantage of school choice, they don't want to vote for the Democrats who keep promising to kill school choice. Now, Harry Hinton on CNN had some commentary on the states right now where everything is in the shadow of Donald Trump. Donald Trump overshadows everything. But outside the Trump distortion field of Washington, where all of America pays attention to Donald Trump, if you pay attention to the states, well, something remarkable is happening there.
Yeah, governors have a whole lot of power, and there's all this talk of a Democratic wave, but the gubernatorial races nationwide should stand as a wake-up call for Democrats, because take a look here, the race raiders, governors post-2026 election, at least tilting to the Republicans. Look at this, a majority, 26. That is, at this point, the number of governors that are expected, at least tilting towards the Republican Party at this point. Democrats come in at just 20. The rest of the races are toss-up. Of course, you sum up to 50. And I will note that the Republicans right now hold a 26 to 24 gubernatorial seat advantage. So at this point, it doesn't look like Republicans on the net and the aggregate are actually going to lose any governorships. In fact, when you add in those toss-ups, they may gain. So this should stand as a major wake-up call to Democrats, because if there's a wave building, it has not, at least at this point, hit the state level when it comes to governorships.
And add to that, you point out that when it comes to governor's races, Democrats have had a bit of a problem over recent years.
Yeah, they have had a big problem recently. If you go back, the last time that Democrats held a majority of governorships was all the way back in 2010, and that streak is expected to continue. And I will note, I went all the way back through the record books, Kate Baldwin. I went all the way back through the record books. This is now the longest streak in which Democrats did not hold a majority of governorships in at least a century. This is a massive problem for Democrats, because as we mentioned at the top, a lot of the policy is determined on the state level. And if all of a sudden you can't actually lead a majority of governorships, the executive branch on the state level, that means Republicans are in fact forming and implementing most of the policies in the states, and therefore a lot of the policies nationwide.
And those policies are different from each state. There are certainly echoes of similarity in Republican states, but not nearly the uniformity of idea implementation that you see in California and Virginia, where the Virginia Democrats got elected. They immediately raised taxes. They immediately put boys in girls' sports. They immediately put boys back in girls' locker rooms. They did all the cultural, structural things that the California Democrats do, protection, abortion on demand, all those sorts of things. You find far more heterogeneous policy ideas within Republican states than you do the Democratic monoculture right now. And also, you have far more states led by Republicans willing to stand up against Washington, D.C., including the Trump administration. That rarely gets covered. But, Donald Trump right now is mad at Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma, because Kevin Stitt is the chairman of the National Governors Association. Not the Republican Governors Association, but the national one that has Democrats and Republicans together. And historically, the Democratic governors and Republican governors all go meet at the White House with the President of the United States. They did it last year, as a matter of fact. That's where the governor of Maine and Donald Trump had a big argument about trans issues. This year, the White House said only the Republicans were invited, and Kevin Stitt, as the head of the organization, said, well, then we're not coming. And Trump flew into a fury about Kevin Stitt standing up to him. You're having more governors on the right stand up to Donald Trump. Very famously, Brian Kemp in Georgia not only stood up to Donald Trump, but actually got reelected with a higher margin of victory than he did the first time when he was considered wrapped around Donald Trump. In fact, my advice to Republicans around the country is that in very few cases does it help you to wrap yourself in Trump's blanket. That doesn't mean don't seek his endorsement. That doesn't mean don't say you're a Trump guy or MAGA. But when you bind yourself and identify yourself as solely in his shadow, a lot of independent voters are moving towards the Democrats in that case. Republicans love Donald Trump. Nobody else does. They like his policies. They don't care for him. And that's kind of the funny thing that tends to get missed by the media. Americans love Donald Trump's tax cuts, and they're going to love their 11% increase in their tax refund. And Americans love deporting illegal aliens. 70% of Americans support it. They may not like how Kristi Noem did it, but they like Tom Homan. All of these situations are to the benefit of Republican governors to embrace many of the policies, even if not the personality of Donald Trump. But this translates into something else, too. If you go back to the founding of this country, our presidents tended to be secretaries of state, not the vice presidents. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson beat Vice President John Adams. You had Monroe had been Secretary of State. A number of secretaries of state became presidents of the United States. Over time, as the country spread and grew, we've had our share of generals and military strategists who have become president, but also governors. You had Jimmy Carter, governor of Georgia, become president, followed by Ronald Reagan. The governor of California became president. His vice president became president. Then the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, became president. Then the governor of Texas became president, George W. Bush. Governors tend to be where a lot of us get our presidents from these days, either from vice presidents now or from presidents. And occasionally you get wild cards in there like Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton, the senator from New York, wanted to run, but of course she was also the first lady of the United States for 8 years. Barack Obama was a senator from Illinois, but it tends to be a lot of governors get elected president of the United States after the 20th century. Governors have to campaign across states, have to build coalitions, and the Republicans have a deeper bench. Not only that, but here's something else Democrats abhor pointing out. They get very defensive when you point this out. Republican governors are more able to win in diverse states than Democrats. Democrats win in monolithic progressive states. Progressives in the United States have cloistered themselves into progressive strongholds. California, Chicago, Illinois, the whole state of Illinois would be a Republican state but for Chicago. New York would probably be a completely Republican state but for New York City. The progressives cloister in urban areas, and those urban areas grow in populations, and they begin to dominate the politics of certain states. Republicans, they get elected in more diverse states, intellectual diversity, and frankly, skin color diversity to a degree. Arizona doesn't have a Republican governor right now, but it has tended to be a Republican state where you have a grand coalition between white and Hispanic voters. Texas, of course, you've got to navigate racial politics in Texas between the Hispanic community, the black community, the white community. Greg Abbott's going to get reelected there for a fourth term. In Georgia, you have the rural voters, the urban voters, the black voters, the white voters, the Hispanic voters, the Asian voters in the Atlanta corridor going into Gwinnett County there. Republicans have to build coalitions, not just of white voters anymore, but of Hispanic voters in particular, and pick off as many young black men as they can. Democrats in Democratic states rarely have to do that anymore. As a result, they're less thoughtful on the campaign trail when they run for the presidency. They tend to align more to their base. Look at Hillary Clinton and Robbie Mook in 2016, who just thought they just needed people like them, white liberal Brooklynites, to cross the finish line. And it didn't work out that way. It's not going to work out that way. Republicans have a deeper bench to field. It's not always successful, and they certainly have their fair share of clunkers too. But this is the longest stretch of time Democrats haven't had a majority of governors' mansions going back over 100 years in the United States. And it has a lot to do with how Democrats have cloistered themselves. And inevitably, when they lose power, they start to delegitimize the United States Senate, say, well, the Senate's anti-democratic. Yes, it is. That was by design. It represents the states, not the people. They're already starting to get nervous about the 2030 census. That's one of the reasons they want so many illegal aliens in Democratic states, because illegal aliens get counted for the census, which then affects the number of members of Congress, which affects the Electoral College. People are leaving Democratic states and leaving behind Democratic ideas, and that's really not a bad thing. We all get stuck in the Trump distortion field of Washington, D.C. and the news of the day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you get outside of Washington, D.C., Republicans, even with all the problems Donald Trump sometimes causes, are outperforming the Democrats at the state level. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. I got to play you this clip. J.D. Vance was on with Martha McCallum on Fox News, and he was asked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's flubs and ignorance in Munich, and I think he made a very wise point.
Here's another person who may want a different job in the future and is definitely doing some reflection on how things went for her in Munich. Watch this.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States.
Martha, you bring me on your show and you show me the most uncomfortable 20 seconds of television I've ever seen. My takeaway from that.
What happened there? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a person who doesn't know what she actually thinks. And I've seen this way too much in Washington with politicians where they are given lines. And when you ask them to go outside the lines they were given, they completely fall apart because, look, does anybody really believe that AOC has very thoughtful ideas about the global world order or about what the United States should do with our policy in Asia or our policy in Europe? No, this is a person who is mouthing the slogans that somebody else gave her, and it
I guess
shows
no one gave her one for that one.
I guess not, and it shows how thin the Democrats' policy actually is on all these very, very important questions. Look, that was embarrassing. If I had given that answer, I would say, you know what, maybe I ought to go read a book about China and Taiwan before I go out on the world stage again. I hope that Congresswoman Cortez has the same humility. I'm skeptical.
That's actually a great answer, and he's right. So often the Democrats think that they can get a pass because they're not going to get asked the tough questions of Republicans. The media and the Democrats together just have the sick symbiotic relationship, and it makes the Democratic candidates typically weaker on the national stage. That's why they got to circle wagons around them like they're doing to James Tallarico in Texas and trying to stop Jasmine Crockett, who's tied with him in the polling. The Democrats work with the media to avoid being asked the tough questions until they get them. Swiss America is asking you to think about the tough questions when it comes to American fiscal policy, the secret war on cash the government is executing to try to pay attention and monitor your purchases. At a time where the BRIC nations are rallying to try to get away from the American currency as the reserve currency, among other things, it's worth checking out their report. It takes less than 15 minutes to read, and you can get it completely for free. All you have to do is call or text 800-289-2646. Now, when you call 800-289-2646, what you do is you either tell them on the phone when you call them that Eric Erickson sent you, or just text Eric, E-R-I-C-K. That's it. Text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency. The report takes less than 15 minutes to read. Swiss America wants to help you with your retirement and finances. Get their report for free. Just mention me when you call or text 800-289-2646 or go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric. Message and data rates may apply.